My name is Bernice. I am 32 years old, and I will never forget that Christmas Eve. After 3 years away, I surprised my family with an unannounced visit. What greeted me shattered my heart. My grandmother, Eleanor, sat shivering on the porch in 30-degree weather, wearing only a thin sweater. Inside, through the window, my family laughed and sipped champagne by the fireplace. I lifted Grandma into my arms, kicked open the door, and spoke 6 words that turned their faces ghostly white. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever stood up for someone who could not defend themselves. The bond between my grandmother, Eleanor, and me runs deeper than most. She became my rock when I was just 8 years old after my mother Diane remarried a man named Richard. Mom was always eager to please her new husband, often at the expense of her relationship with me. Grandma stepped in and filled that void with unwavering love. Our little routine began when Grandma moved into our house. Every morning she would wake up early to make me breakfast before school. Not just any breakfast, but special meals with heart-shaped pancakes or eggs with funny faces that always made me smile. She never forgot to tuck a handwritten note of encouragement in my lunchbox. These small gestures meant everything to a child who felt increasingly invisible in her own home. After school, Grandma would be waiting with a warm smile and questions about my day that showed she genuinely cared about my answers. We would spend hours together in the kitchen where she taught me to bake her famous apple pie, sharing stories of her youth while the sweet aroma filled our home. Her hands marked with age spots and gentle wrinkles guided mine with patience as she passed down family recipes that connected me to generations before. Cooking is love made visible. Bernice, she would say, her blue eyes twinkling. When words fail, a homemade meal speaks volumes. Those kitchen lessons were about more than food. They were about resilience, creativity, and finding joy in nurturing others. Grandma had weathered many storms in her 80 years, including losing Grandpa to cancer and raising 3 children, mostly on her own. Yet, she approached life with graceful strength that I desperately wanted to inherit. The contrast between Grandma and my mother was stark. While Diane rushed through our interactions, constantly distracted by Richard's needs or my half-sister Vanessa's demands, Grandma offered her full, unhurried presence. She attended every school play, science fair, and parent-teacher conference, when Mom and Richard were too busy. She celebrated my victories, no matter how small, and helped me process disappointments with wisdom that made failures feel like stepping stones rather than dead ends. When I struggled with algebra in 7th grade, Grandma hired a tutor with her modest savings rather than letting me fall behind. "Your education is an investment no one can take from you," she insisted. Thanks to her support, I eventually excelled in mathematics, which later opened doors to scholarships. As I navigated the turbulent waters of adolescence, Grandma became my confidant. I could tell her anything without fear of judgment. When I experienced my first heartbreak at 16, she sat with me as I cried, offering tissues and perspective in equal measure. "This pain feels all-consuming now," she said, "but it's teaching your heart how to be stronger and more discerning. The right people will value the treasure that you are." Meanwhile, my relationship with my mother and stepfather grew increasingly strained. Richard was a successful businessman who valued appearances and achievements above emotional connections. He treated me with cordial indifference, at best saving his affection for Vanessa, his biological daughter who arrived 2 years after their marriage. Mom seemed to adopt his values, becoming more concerned with social status than nurturing relationships. Vanessa quickly learned to manipulate this dynamic, receiving lavish gifts and attention. While I was expected to show gratitude for basic necessities when I needed new clothes for school, it was framed as an inconvenience. When Vanessa wanted designer labels, shopping sprees were organized with enthusiasm. Grandma noticed these disparities and quietly supplemented what my parents withheld, always careful not to create more tension in the household. Our home was a spacious 2-story colonial in an affluent neighborhood. Grandma initially had a comfortable room on the main floor with her own bathroom, a small sitting area, and a view of the garden she lovingly tended. It was her sanctuary decorated with cherished photographs and mementos from her long life. I spent countless hours in that room listening to stories about each treasured item: the antique music box that played Claire de Lune, the hand-stitched quilt made by her mother, the collection of vintage books with their distinctive paper smell. When I received a full scholarship to study design at a university 300 miles away, I was torn between excitement for my future and worry about leaving Grandma. She insisted I go pursue my dreams. "I will be fine," she assured me, her voice firm with conviction. "Your success will be my greatest joy." So I left, promising to call often and visit during breaks. At first, I maintained this commitment religiously. We spoke almost daily, sharing details about my classes and her daily activities. I returned home for holidays and some weekends, treasuring our reunions, but as my coursework intensified and internship opportunities arose, my visits became less frequent. Still, our phone calls remained my lifeline to home, to the unconditional love I knew I could always count on. Looking back now, I realized that was when things began to change. Not suddenly, but in subtle ways I failed to recognize from a distance. If only I had paid closer attention to the shifting dynamics, perhaps I could have intervened sooner. Perhaps I could have prevented the nightmare that awaited me that fateful Christmas Eve. After graduating with honors, I landed a position at a prestigious design firm in Chicago. My career took off faster than I anticipated, with promotions coming quickly as my innovative approaches caught the attention of senior leadership. By 29, I was leading my own team and traveling internationally for client presentations. Success demanded sacrifices, including the time I could devote to family connections. My calls to Grandma became weekly rather than daily, though I made sure they were substantive. I would carve out an hour each Sunday, settling into my apartment's window seat with tea the way we used to sit together. During these conversations, Grandma always insisted she was doing well, that everyone was treating her just fine. Her standard response when he asked how things were at home became a cheerful, "Oh, everything is okay here. Nothing for you to worry about." But something in her voice changed over time. The vibrant enthusiasm that had always characterized her stories began to dim. Our conversations grew shorter, with Grandma offering fewer details about her daily life. When I asked specific questions about family dinners or activities, she would redirect with questions about my work or vague statements like the usual routine or nothing special to report. The first concrete sign that something was amiss came about 2 years after I moved to Chicago. During one of our calls, Grandma mentioned casually that she had relocated to a different room in the house. "Your mother thought it would be better if I moved to the smaller bedroom near the laundry room," she explained. "Vanessa needs more space now that she is 21, and they combined my old room with part of the guest room to make her a suite." I felt an immediate pang of concern. Grandma's original room had been specifically chosen for its accessibility and comfort, with large windows that flooded the space with natural light she loved. The room near the laundry was essentially a converted storage space with a tiny window that faced the neighbor's brick wall. "Are you comfortable there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "It is cozier," she replied after a pause, "and I do not need much space at my age." When I pressed further, asking about her belongings and if everything had been moved properly, she changed the subject. Later in the conversation, she mentioned almost as an aside that some of her less essential items had been put in the attic for safekeeping, including her collection of vintage books that had belonged to her mother. The next troubling incident occurred when I called on Thanksgiving, and Richard answered instead of Grandma or me mother. "Eleanor cannot come to the phone right now," he said, his tone brisk. "She is resting. The day has been tiring for her. Could you please wake her? I would love to wish her happy Thanksgiving," I requested. "That would not be wise," he replied. "At her age, uninterrupted rest is essential. I will tell her you called tomorrow." When I finally spoke to Grandma 3 days later, she sounded subdued. She mentioned that she had eaten her Thanksgiving meal in her room because it was more comfortable that way, and the family had guests I would not know. Over the next year, I attempted to visit home 3 times, but each trip was derailed by last-minute complications orchestrated by my mother or Richard. The first planned visit coincided with Easter. I had booked flights and informed my mother weeks in advance. 2 days before my departure, Diane called to say Grandma had a cold and they were concerned about contagion. "It would be terrible if you caught it and had to miss work," she insisted. "Better to postpone until she is feeling better." When I suggested I did not mind risking a cold to see family, Richard got on the phone. "We have already made other arrangements for the weekend, assuming you would not be here," he said firmly. It would be inconvenient to change plans now. The second attempt came in August for Grandma's 83rd birthday. This time, my mother claimed they were planning a surprise trip for Grandma that same weekend. "We are taking her to see her sister in Florida," Diane explained. "She's been asking to visit for ages." When I spoke to Grandma the following week and casually asked about her trip, her confusion was palpable. "What trip, dear? I have not been anywhere." When I mentioned what Mom had told me, she quickly backpedaled. "Oh, that it was postponed. Your mother has been so busy with Vanessa's college graduation planning. My third attempt to visit was planned for Thanksgiving. I did not even tell them I was coming, intending to surprise everyone. However, my flight was canceled due to a snowstorm, and I could not get another booking in time." During my Thanksgiving call, Grandma sounded more distant than ever. There were long pauses in our conversation, and twice I heard someone enter the room, causing her to lower her voice. "Is everything truly okay, Grandma?" I asked directly. "You know, you can tell me if something is wrong." There was a long silence before she answered. "Life changes as we age, Bernice. Some adjustments are harder than others, but I am managing." Then in an even quieter voice, she added, "I miss our talks in person." That December, I made a decision. I requested 2 weeks of vacation over Christmas, determined to see my grandmother, regardless of whatever excuses might be manufactured. I did not inform anyone of my plans, booking a rental car to drive from the airport to ensure my independence. Something felt increasingly wrong in that house, and I needed to see for myself what was happening. As the holidays approached, my calls to Grandma went increasingly unanswered. When I did reach her, our conversations were brief and often interrupted. She sounded tired, her once sharp mind sometimes struggling to follow our discussion. The last time we spoke before Christmas, she said something that chilled me. "If anything ever happens," she whispered, "remember that I kept your grandmother's ring in my blue jewelry box. It should go to you." "Grandma, why are you talking like this?" I asked, alarmed. "Just in case," she replied. "Just in case." That was the last time we spoke before I made my journey home, my heart heavy with worry and a growing sense of dread. I arrived, in town on Christmas Eve, the streets glowing with festive lights that did little to warm the frigid night. The temperature display in my rental car flashed 30 degrees Fahrenheit as I turned onto the familiar maple-lined street where I had grown up. It was just past 8:20, and most houses were illuminated with holiday decorations and the movement of gatherings inside. Our family home stood grand as ever, its colonial facade adorned with professional-grade Christmas lights that Richard insisted on having installed each year. The large picture window facing the front yard revealed the massive Christmas tree in the living room, decorated in the coordinated silver and blue theme my mother preferred over more sentimental ornaments. I parked across the street, gathering my courage before approaching. Through the window, I could see people moving about the living room dressed in holiday finery. My mother's annual Christmas Eve party was clearly underway. I recognized some family, friends and relatives all holding champagne flutes and laughing. The scene looked perfect magazine-worthy in its elegant staging. As I stepped out of the car, the cold immediately bit through my coat. I pulled it tighter, hurrying across the street, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. I was halfway up the front walk when movement on the porch caught my eye. There, huddled on the wooden bench near the front door, was a small figure in a thin sweater and what looked like pajama pants. At first, I thought it must be a decoration I did not recognize. But then it moved again, arms wrapped tightly around a frail body in a futile attempt to generate warmth. "Hello," I called, quickening my pace. "Are you okay?" The figure looked up and my heart stopped. It was my grandmother, her face pale and lips tinged with blue. Her silver hair, always neatly styled when I knew her, hung limply around her face. She was shivering violently, her thin body rocking back and forth on the bench. "Grandma," I gasped, rushing the last few steps. "What are you doing out here?" She looked at me with confusion, her eyes cloudy and unfocused. Cold was all she managed to say through chattering teeth. I immediately shed my coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, kneeling to look into her face. Her skin felt like ice, and up close I could see she had lost significant weight. The vibrant, strong woman who had raised me was now frighteningly frail. "Grandma, it is me, Bernice," I said clearly, taking her frozen hands and mine. How long have you been out here? Recognition slowly dawned in her eyes. Bernice, she whispered, her voice cracking. Then suddenly she began to cry, silent tears freezing on her cheeks almost immediately in the bitter cold. You came? Of course I came, I assured her, fighting back my own tears as rage began to build in my chest. Why are you outside? Where is everyone? Between shuddering breaths, she explained. She had been helping set up for the party earlier in the day. While carrying a pitcher of water to the dining room, her arthritis had caused her hand to spasm, and she spilled water on the tablecloth in some of the place settings. Richard had berated her in front of the caterers, calling her useless and a burden. He said I ruined Christmas Eve dinner, she whimpered. Diane agreed with him. They told me to go to my room, but then Richard came and said I should think about what I had done. He said it should cool off outside until I could behave properly at a formal event. How long ago was that, Grandma? I asked, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. The sun was still up, she replied. I knocked to come back in after a while, but no one answered. The music is too loud. I checked my watch. Sunset had been around 4:30. She had been sitting in freezing temperatures for at least 3 hours, possibly 4. I helped her stand, alarmed at how light she felt as I supported her weight. Through the window, I could see the party in full swing. In the center of the room stood my mother, radiant in a red cocktail dress, laughing as Richard filled her champagne glass. Vanessa was perched on the arm of the sofa, holding court with several admiring guests. Not one of them had thought to check on the elderly woman freezing on their porch. As Grandma leaned against me, I felt something snap inside. This was not neglect. This was cruelty, deliberate and calculated. My grandmother could have developed hypothermia or worse. In these conditions, she could have died while they sipped expensive champagne mere feet away. Can you walk, Grandma? I asked gently. She nodded weakly. Not very fast. I made a quick decision and carefully lifted her into my arms. She weighed almost nothing. Another sign of how much her health had deteriorated. Her body trembled against mine as I carried her toward the front door. Through the window, I saw my cousin Thomas notice us first. His eyes widened, and he nudged my Aunt Sarah, who turned and froze mid-con conversation. Like a wave of awareness spread through the room as more faces turned toward the window. I shifted Grandma's weight in my arms, steadying her as I prepared to confront the family that had cast her aside like an unwanted possession. The rage inside me was tempered only by my concern for her well-being. I needed to get her warm immediately, but I also needed answers. I saw Richard notice the commotion and follow the gaze of his guests to the window. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to something like fear when he recognized me. Good, he should be afraid. With my grandmother cradled against my chest, I approached the door. It was locked. Of course, it was locked. They had never intended to let her back in. I rang the doorbell, waiting with mounting fury as footsteps approached. The door swung open, revealing my mother's perfectly made-up face, her practice party smile freezing when she saw me. Her eyes darted from my face to my grandmother's huddled form in my arms. "Bennis, what? What are you doing here?" she stammered, blocking the entrance rather than stepping aside. I did not answer her directly. Instead, I spoke the 6 words that had been building inside me since finding Grandma on that bench. How could you do this to hair? My voice was low, but carried enough force that several nearby guests turned to stare. Behind my mother, Richard appeared, his expression darkening when he saw us. "This is a private party," he began, as though I were a stranger who had wandered in off the street. Eleanor was just getting some air. Some air, I repeated incredulously. She has been sitting outside for hours in freezing temperatures with no coat. She could have died out there. Without waiting for permission, I pushed past them into the warmth of the house. The contrast between the cold outside and the heated interior was stark, highlighting just how dangerously cold it had been for my grandmother. The room fell silent as I carried Grandma toward the fireplace guests, parting before us like the Red Sea. I gently sat her down in the armchair closest to the fire, keeping my coat wrapped around her shoulders. Her shivering had not subsided, concerning me deeply. "Someone get me a blanket," I commanded. And to my surprise, my cousin Thomas immediately left the room, returning moments later with a thick quilt. In nodded gratefully as I tucked it around Grandma. Richard approached his face, a mask of controlled anger. Bones, you are causing a scene. This is completely unnecessary. Your grandmother made a mess of our dinner preparations and was asked to take a short time out. She knows we would have let her back in if she had knocked. She did knock, I said, rising to face him. No one. Answered because you were all too busy celebrating to care whether an 83-year-old woman was freezing to death on your doorstep. My mother stepped forward, placing a hand on Richard's arm. Sweetheart, I am sure this is just a misunderstanding. Mom has been getting confused lately, forgetting things. She probably forgot that she could use her key to come back in. I turned to her, unable to believe what I was hearing. What key, Mom? The doors are dead-bolted from the inside. And even if they were not, are you seriously suggesting it's okay to send an elderly woman outside in below-freezing weather as punishment? What is wrong with you people? By now, the party guests were shifting uncomfortably, some discreetly gathering their coats, while others watched with undisguised interest. Vanessa stood frozen by the Christmas tree, her expression unreadable. You do not understand the situation, Richard said dismissively. Eleanor has become increasingly difficult to live with. She is constantly underfoot, making messes, interrupting conversations. Today was just the last straw when she ruined a tablecloth that has been in my family for generations. A tablecloth, I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You left her to freeze over edible cloth. Grandma spoke up then, her voice stronger than before, but still trembling. It is not just today, Berenice. Things have been different since you left for college. With gentle prompting, the truth began to emerge. Over the past 3 years, my grandmother had been systematically isolated and mistreated. After I left, they had indeed moved her from her comfortable room to what was essentially a converted storage closet near the laundry room. The space was small, poorly heated, and lacked proper ventilation. They took most of my things, she told me, gaining strength as she spoke. Said they were cluttering the house and put them in boxes in the attic. My books, my photographs, even the quilt my mother made. Food, too, had become a weapon. Grandma revealed that she was often told to eat in her room rather than joining family meals. Her portions were small and frequently consisted of leftovers, while the rest of the family dined on fresh, well-prepared food. When she complained of hunger, Richard told her that at her age she should be watching her weight. They took my phone away 6 months ago. She continued, her voice breaking, said I was making too many unnecessary calls and running up the bill. I could only use the house phone when they allowed it, and they were always there listening. Each revelation hit me like a physical blow. I had been calling the house phone believing Grandma when she said her cell phone was broken. In reality, they had confiscated it to control her communication with the outside world, especially with me. Richard attempted to interject, claiming these were necessary boundaries for someone who had become dependent and demanding, but I was beyond listening to his justifications. Where are her legal documents? I demanded. Her financial papers, her identification. A flicker of something like panic crossed Richard's face. Those are kept secure in my office for safekeeping. Safekeeping or control? I challenged, pulling out my phone. You know what? I have been recording this entire conversation since I walked in. Every admission, every excuse. This was a bluff, as I had not actually been recording, but the effect was immediate. Richard lunged forward, attempting to grab my phone. I stepped back quickly, starting the recording function for real. Touch me, and I will add assault to the elder abuse charges, I warned loud enough for everyone to hear. Richard froze, suddenly aware of the witnesses surrounding us. I turned to the room at large. I apologize to those of you who came here expecting a pleasant evening, but I need you all to know what has been happening in this house. My grandmother has been systematically abused, isolated, and neglected by the people who should have been caring for her. Some guests looked shocked, others uncomfortable, and a few nodded slightly, as if they had suspected something was amiss. My Aunt Sarah stepped forward. I noticed Eleanor has lost weight, she admitted quietly. When I asked Diane about it, she said Eleanor was on a special diet for her health. A starvation diet, apparently, I replied bitterly. My mother finally found her voice again. You have no right to come into our home and make these accusations. You have been gone for years pursuing your career, while we have been caring for Mom day in and day out. Caring for her? I laughed incredulously. You call this care. Locking an elderly woman outside in freezing temperatures is care. Taking away her possessions, her dignity, her contact with the outside world is care. As we argued, I noticed Grandma had begun searching through a small drawer in the end table beside her chair. She pulled out a folded piece of paper with trembling hands and passed it to me. I kept this hidden, she whispered. It was a bank statement showing her pension deposits, but no withdrawals for the past year. When I questioned her about this, she revealed the most disturbing information yet. Richard manages my money now, she explained. He said it was better that way with my memory not being what it used to be. I have to ask for cash when I need something, but he usually says no. Richard's face flushed with anger. That is enough. Eleanor agreed to this arrangement. She signed the papers willingly. Did she? I challenged. Or did you manipulate and coerce an elderly woman into giving you control of her finances? That is financial abuse, Richard. It is criminal. Vanessa finally approached her, expression troubled. Dad, is this true? Have you been taking Grandma's money? Richard turned on her, his composure cracking. Stay out of this, Vanessa. You have benefited plenty from the arrangement. That admission sent a ripple through the room. Even my mother looked stunned, as if she had not fully understood the extent of her husband's actions. I turned to Grandma, who was looking stronger by the minute, as the warmth of the room and the fire thawed her body. We are leaving, I told her firmly. Tonight, I am taking you somewhere safe. You cannot just take her, Richard declared, stepping between us and the door. She is legally a resident of this house. I activated the recording function on my phone, making sure he could see me do it. This time, I am documenting everything from this point forward. I announced loud enough for the remaining guests to hear. Every threat, every admission, every attempt, to prevent my grandmother from leaving an abusive situation. Several guests who had been edging toward the door stopped to watch the confrontation unfold. Their presence worked in my favor, providing witnesses to whatever happened next. Mom, I turned to Diane, are you really going to stand by and let your husband abuse your mother this way? Because that is what this is. Abuse. Elder abuse is a crime in all 50 states. My mother looked conflicted, her carefully constructed facade cracking slightly. We have been taking care of her, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Taking care of her, I echoed incredulously. By locking her outside in freezing weather, by isolating her in a storage room, by controlling her, money and monitoring her phone calls. That is not care, Mom. That is control and cruelty. I turned to address the guests directly. I apologize for disrupting your evening, but I need witnesses to what is happening here. My grandmother has been subjected to emotional, financial, and physical abuse in this house. Tonight, I found her locked outside in 31-degree weather for hours because she accidentally spilled water on edible cloth. Murmurs of shock rippled through the room. Aunt Sarah stepped forward. I will be a witness, she declared firmly. I have noticed changes in Eleanor's appearance and behavior, but did not realize how serious the situation was. 2 other relatives and a family friend nodded in agreement. Their support gave me the confidence to proceed with my plan. Grandma, where are your most important belongings? I asked gently. What do you need tonight that we cannot leave behind? She directed me to her room first, the tiny converted storage space that confirmed everything she had told me. The room was barely large enough for a twin bed and small dresser. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows. The only window was covered with heavy drapes that, when I pulled them back, revealed a view of the neighbor's brick wall. As we gathered her essentials, Grandma whispered directions to where some of her most treasured possessions had been hidden. With Aunt Sarah's help, I retrieved a small box of family photographs she had managed to keep from the attic purge, tucking it safely into my bag. "My jewelry box," Grandma whispered. "The blue one from your grandfather. Vanessa has it in her room." I confronted Vanessa in the hallway, demanding the return of Grandma's jewelry box. To my surprise, she disappeared into her room without argument and returned with the ornate blue box. "I did not know," she said quietly, avoiding my eyes. "I mean, I knew things were not great for Grandma, but I did not know how bad. Dad told me she gave me these things as gifts." She hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a gold locket. "This washer's too. I am sorry." Taking the jewelry box and locket, I nodded curtly. "If you really want to make amends, you will tell the truth about what you have witnessed in this house." Back in the living room, Richard was on his phone speaking in low, urgent tones. I caught fragments about family matter and confusion. He was already trying to control the narrative. "I am calling the police," I announced loudly, pulling out my own phone. "And Adult Protective Services. This situation needs to be documented officially." Richard ended his call abruptly. "That is unnecessary. We can resolve this as a family. This stopped being a family matter when you locked an elderly woman outside to freeze," I replied coldly, dialing 911. I reported the situation, concisely emphasizing the immediate danger to my grandmother and requesting both police and medical assistance. While waiting for authorities to arrive, I turned my attention to Richard's office, where Grandma had indicated her important documents were kept. The door was locked. "Open it," I demanded. "That is private property," Richard objected. "You have no right. My grandmother's legal and financial documents are in their documents you have used to control her life. Either open it now or explain to the police why you are withholding them." Under the watchful eyes of the remaining guests, Richard reluctantly unlocked the office door. Inside, I headed straight for the large safe in the corner, demanding he open it as well. The safe contained exactly what I suspected: Grandma's passport, social security card, insurance policies, and a folder of financial documents, including power of attorney papers with signatures that looked suspiciously shaky compared to examples of Grandma's handwriting I'd seen throughout my life. Most disturbing was a deed transfer document dated just 6 months earlier, showing that ownership of Grandma's small house in the next town, which she had kept even after moving in with us, had been transferred to Richard and Diane for the sum of $1. "You stole her house?" I asked incredulously, holding up the document. "She wanted us to have it," Richard insisted. "She was tired of dealing with rental management." Grandma shook her head vehemently. "I never agreed to sell my house. That was my safety net, my independence." I carefully photographed each document with my phone before gathering them into a folder. "We will have a forensic document examiner look at these signatures. I warned financial elder abuse is a felony." When the police arrived, they separated us to take statements. The responding officers, a compassionate female sergeant and her younger partner, listened carefully to Grandma's account, taking detailed notes and photographs of the conditions in her room. The paramedics who accompanied them checked Grandma's vital signs, confirming mild hypothermia and dehydration. They recommended immediate medical attention, offering to transport her to the hospital. "I will take her," I assured them, "but I would like your medical assessment documented officially." As the officers continued their investigation, speaking with witnesses and examining the evidence, Richard and my mother huddled with a hastily summoned attorney who had arrived, looking disheveled and concerned. The police sergeant approached me as I helped Grandma into a warmer outfit for our departure. "We have enough here to file charges if your grandmother wishes to pursue that route," she explained gently. "Even without that, we can help you obtain an emergency protective order tonight." Grandma, who had been silent during much of the legal discussion, suddenly straightened her shoulders and found her voice. "I want to press charges," she stated clearly. "Not just for me, but for any other elderly person who might suffer the same treatment in silence." She turned to face my mother, her only child, who stood pale and shaken by the Christmas tree. "Diane," she said, her voice steady despite her physical frailty, "I gave you everything I had, including my love support and later my trust. You chose to betray that trust in the worst possible way. I forgave many things over the years, making excuses for your behavior as any mother would. But what happened here cannot be excused or forgotten. The room fell completely silent as my grandmother, standing taller than she had all evening, delivered her verdict. You are not the daughter I raised you to be. And until you find that person again, until you understand the gravity of what you have done, I cannot call you my daughter. The impact of those words visibly devastated my mother, who crumpled into a nearby chair. Richard attempted to comfort her, but she shrugged away his hand, perhaps finally beginning to comprehend her role in this tragedy. As we prepared to leave, I turned to address the family members who had witnessed everything. Elder abuse thrives. In silence, I told them, remember what you saw here tonight. The next time you encounter an elderly person who seems withdrawn, whose family speaks for them, whose appearance has changed dramatically, speak up. Ask questions. You might save a life. With Grandma's essential belongings packed and the police report filed, we finally left the house that had become her prison. As I helped her into my rental car, she turned to look back at the elegant home with its twinkling Christmas lights and perfect holiday decorations. I never thought my own family could hurt me more than any stranger, she whispered. You have a different family now, I assured her, squeezing her hand. One that will never let you down again. That night, I checked Grandma into a comfortable hotel suite not far from our family home. The holiday meant most establishments were operating with minimal staff. But when the night manager heard our situation, he personally ensured we had everything we needed, including extra blankets, hottea, and a late-night meal sent to our room. Once settled, I contacted an old friend from high school who had become a geriatric nurse. Despite the late hour and holiday, she came to the hotel to check Grandma, more thoroughly confirming the paramedics' assessment of mild hypothermia and dehydration, but also noting signs of malnutrition and what appeared to be the early effects of emotional trauma. Physical wounds heal faster than emotional ones, she told me quietly, as Grandma dozed in the bedroom. She will need time, patience, and probably professional counseling to process what happened. After my friend left, I sat in a chair by Grandma's bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. The contrast between the peaceful hotel room and the nightmare we had left behind was stark. Outside snow began to fall, transforming the world into a postcard-perfect Christmas scene that felt surreal given the evening's events. Around midnight, Grandma stirred and opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. It is okay, I reassured her quickly. We are in a hotel. You are safe. She relaxed her gaze, finding mine in the soft lamplight. I thought I might have dreamed you coming, she admitted. I have had that dream so many times. My heart broke all over again at those words. I am so sorry I did not come sooner. I told her, my voice catching. I should have known something was wrong. I should have seen through their excuses. Grandma shook her head weakly. No, child. I hid it from you deliberately. I did not want to burden your life or career with my problems. You raised me, I reminded her. You were always there for me. Taking care of you could never be a burden. We talked for hours that night, Grandma gradually revealing more details about how her life had deteriorated after I left. The changes had been incremental at first, small indignities that seemed insignificant in isolation, but formed a pattern of abuse over time. Richard always resented my presence, she explained. He viewed me as an obligation, a drain on resources that could be spent on Vanessa or their social climbing. After you left, there was no one watching, no one he needed to impress with good behavior. The financial control had begun, with help managing her bills gradually expanding until Richard had complete control of her pension and savings. The isolation had been equally calculated, with her phone access restricted and visitors discouraged with excuses about their health or prior commitments. The hardest part, she confessed, tears slipping down her cheeks, was knowing what they were telling you about me. That I was confused, difficult, or too tired for visits. I worried you might believe them and stop trying to see meal together. Never, I assured her. I always knew something was wrong. I just did not realize how wrong. By morning, exhausted but determined, I began making calls to build our support network. My first call was to a college friend who had become an elder law attorney. She recommended a colleague in our hometown who specialized in cases of elder abuse and financial exploitation. Someone who could help us navigate both criminal charges and civil recovery of Grandma's assets. Next, I contacted my supervisor at the design firm, explaining the situation and requesting an extended leave of absence. To my relief, she was immediately supportive, offering to arrange remote work options once things stabilized. "Family comes first," she insisted. "Take the time you need." On Christmas Day, we received an unexpected visitor. Vanessa arrived at our hotel room door, looking uncertain and carrying several bags. "I brought Grandma's quilts from the attic," she explained hesitantly, "and some of her photo albums. I also found these in Dad's closet." She handed me a small box containing Grandma's wedding ring and several other family heirlooms that had supposedly been lost. While Grandma rested, Vanessa and I talked in the hotel lobby. She was struggling to reconcile the father she thought she knew with the man who had orchestrated such cruelty. "I knew they were treating Grandma differently," she admitted, "but Dad always had explanations that seemed reasonable. She needed supervision because of memory issues. She needed a simpler diet for her health. The smaller room was safer because it was on one level." "Did you ever question those explanations?" I asked, not hiding my anger entirely. Vanessa looked down at her hands. "Not enough," she acknowledged. "I was wrapped up in college than my job. It was easier to believe everything was fine." Before she left, Vanessa promised to continue retrieving Grandma's belongings from the house and to be a witness if criminal charges proceeded. It was a small step toward redemption, but a significant one. The days after Christmas were a whirlwind of appointments and arrangements. Our attorney helped us file for emergency guardianship to prevent Richard from making any further financial decisions regarding Grandma's assets. We met with detectives who were building a criminal case based on the financial documents I had recovered and the testimony of witnesses from the Christmas Eve party. A thorough medical examination revealed the true extent of Grandma's physical decline. Beyond the malnutrition, she showed signs of vitamin deficiencies, untreated arthritis pain, and significant muscle atrophy from being confined to her small room. Most concerning were the symptoms of depression and anxiety that manifested in nightmares, hypervigilance, and occasional confusion. These are common responses to prolonged emotional abuse and isolation, the geriatric specialist explained. The good news is that with proper nutrition, medication therapy, and a supportive environment, many of these conditions can improve significantly. While Grandma's health issues were being addressed, I focused on creating a sustainable living situation. My apartment in Chicago was too small for two people, and I wanted Grandma closer to her medical team during recovery. After exploring several options, I found a comfortable two-bedroom apartment in a senior-friendly community not far from the hospital. Our attorney made remarkable progress in recovering Grandma's assets. The house transfer was particularly vulnerable. To challenge us, we discovered Richard had used a notary who was a personal friend and had not properly witnessed Grandma's signature. The financial power of attorney showed similar irregularities with witnesses who could not be located or verified. By New Year's Day, we had established a temporary home in the new apartment, furnished with items from my Chicago place and Grandma's recovered belongings. Seeing her surrounded by her own things again, photographs of loved ones on the walls, and her favorite quilt on her bed, I noticed a marked improvement in her spirits. "It feels like I can breathe again," she told me one evening, as we sat arranging her collection of vintage books on new shelves. "For so long, I existed in a strange fog, knowing things were wrong, but doubting my own perceptions when they insisted everything was fine. That gaslighting had perhaps been the cruelest aspect of the abuse, the systematic undermining of her confidence and reality. To counter this, I established a routine that emphasized Grandma's autonomy and choices. She decided our meal plans chose activities for the day and had unrestricted access to a new cell phone I purchased for her. The criminal investigation continued to build, with Richard facing potential charges of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and fraud. My mother, while not as directly implicated in the financial aspects, faced charges related to neglect and endangerment. The Christmas Eve incident with its multiple witnesses formed the centerpiece of the case. Neither of them attempted to contact us directly, though her attorney made several overtures about resolving the situation amicably. Our response was consistently the same: full restitution of all misappropriated assets, accompanied by legal consequences for their actions. In late January, we received another unexpected visitor. Vanessa had been communicating regularly, bringing more of Grandma's possessions and providing information helpful to our case. This time, she arrived with news. "Mom has left Dad," she announced. "She is staying with Aunt Sarah. She says she wants to talk to Grandma to apologize in person." Grandma considered this information thoughtfully. "Not yet," she decided. "I am not ready to see Diane. Perhaps in time, but not yet." The fact that she could make this decision, could prioritize her own emotional well-being over others' expectations, represented significant healing already. The therapist she was seeing weekly confirmed this growth. "Eleanor is reclaiming her narrative," she explained during a joint session. "That is an essential step in recovering from this kind of trauma." By early February, we'd settled into a new normal. Grandma's health improved steadily with proper nutrition and medical care. Her arthritis responded well to treatment, allowing her greater mobility and independence. The nightmares became less frequent, though certain triggers could still cause anxiety. I arranged to work remotely indefinitely, converting the apartment's small den into a home office. My team in Chicago was supportive, and I found I could maintain my career momentum while being present for Grandma's recovery. The balance was not always perfect, but it was sustainable. Perhaps the most beautiful development was watching Grandma rediscover activities she loved. She joined a seniors book club at the local library. She started container gardening on our small balcony. She even began teaching a weekly baking class at the community center, sharing the skills and recipes she had once taught me. "I forgot who I was for a while," she confided one evening as we walked through the park near our apartment. "They made me feel useless, burdensome. Being needed again, having something valuable to share, reminds me of my worth." That worth had never been in question for me. Every day I thanked whatever impulse had driven me to make that unannounced Christmas Eve visit, to trust my instincts that something was wrong. The thought of what might have happened otherwise was too painful to contemplate. As winter began to release its grip, giving way to early signs of spring, we received notification that Richard had accepted a plea deal, admitting to financial exploitation and neglect in exchange for a reduced sentence. My mother's case remained pending, complicated by questions about her level of awareness and involvement. Vanessa continued her efforts at reconciliation, not just with words, but with actions. She volunteered at the senior center where Grandma taught baking, genuinely engaging with the elderly residents there. She returned the last of Grandma's belongings and helped us document everything for both legal purposes and insurance. Most importantly, she listened to Grandma's experiences without defensiveness or excuses, bearing witness to the truth even when it implicated her father. This willingness to face reality, rather than hide behind comforting lies, represented her greatest amends. By the time the first anniversary of that fateful Christmas Eve approached, our lives had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. Grandma was thriving in her new environment, her health restored, and her spirit resilient. I had found unexpected fulfillment in our shared life. My perspective on success and priorities permanently altered by our experience. Together, we planned a very different kind of Christmas celebration. One centered on gratitude, healing, and the true meaning of family, which we had discovered had little to do with blood and everything to do with love, respect, and care. 1 year after that nightmarish Christmas Eve, Grandma and I stood in the kitchen of our new home, a charming 2-bedroom cottage we had purchased together in a quiet neighborhood. The smell of her famous apple pie filled the air as we prepared for the small gathering of friends and chosen family who would be joining us for Christmas dinner. "Hard to believe how much has changed in a year," I remarked, watching her confidently roll out pie crust with hands that no longer trembled from cold or fear. Grandma smiled, the expression reaching her eyes in a way it had not during those dark days of abuse. "From the worst Christmas to perhaps the best," she agreed. Life has a way of surprising us even at my age. The physical transformation in my grandmother over the past year had been remarkable. Proper nutrition had restored her to a healthy weight. Regular exercise, including water aerobics at the community pool and daily walks, had rebuilt her strength and stamina. Her silver hair, once limp and dull, now shone in the stylish bob she had chosen during what she called her reclamation makeover. More significant than the physical changes, however, was the restoration of her spirit. Therapy had helped her process the trauma of those years, while new activities and friendships had rebuilt her sense of purpose and belonging. She had become an active member of the local senior center, teaching, cooking classes, and organizing a support group for elderly individuals who had experienced abuse or neglect. The healing really began when I stopped blaming myself, she explained as we arranged Christmas cookies on a festive platter. For so long, I accepted their narrative that I was a burden, that I deserved the treatment I received. Recognizing that lie was my first step toward freedom. My own life had undergone equally profound changes. After taking extended leave to help Grandma through the immediate crisis, I'd negotiated a flexible working arrangement that allowed me to be based locally while maintaining my career. The design firm had been surprisingly accommodating, even opening a small satellite office in our town that I now managed. Sometimes I wonder if I would have ever slowed down enough to reassess my priorities if this had not happened, I admitted, arranging candles on the dining table. I was so caught up in climbing the corporate ladder that I let important relationships slide. We cannot change the past, Grandma reminded me gently. Only learn from it and choose differently going forward. That philosophy had guided our approach to family relationships as well. Vanessa had made genuine efforts to atone for her role in the situation, initially by helping us recover Grandma's belongings and testify against Richard, but more importantly, by showing consistent remorse and changed behavior. She visited regularly, always respectful of Grandma's boundaries and eager to rebuild their relationship on healthier terms. She was young and influenced by her father's attitudes. Grandma had reasoned when deciding to allow Vanessa back into her life. The fact that she chose to change when confronted with the truth speaks to her character. My mother's situation was more complicated. After separating from Richard following his arrest, she had cycled through denial, anger, and eventually a fragile acknowledgement of her complicity. The legal system had treated her more leniently than Richard, mandating counseling and community service rather than incarceration due to her lesser role in the financial exploitation. Her relationship with Grandma remained tentative, marked by carefully supervised visits that only recently had evolved into more relaxed interactions. Healing that bond would take years if it ever fully recovered. Richard, meanwhile, had served 6 months in county jail for elder abuse and financial exploitation, followed by probation and mandatory restitution payments. He had made no genuine attempts at reconciliation, maintaining that his actions had been misunderstood and exaggerated. We had minimal contact with him by mutual choice. The legal battle to recover Grandma's assets had been largely successful. The fraudulent transfer of her house had been reversed, and we had sold the property to fund our new home. Her pension and savings had been restored to her control, with additional compensation for emotional distress awarded through a civil suit. More importantly, our experience had inspired changes beyond our personal situation. I had channeled my anger and shock into advocacy, working with local officials to strengthen protections for elderly citizens. Grandma's willingness to speak publicly about her experience had raised awareness of elder abuse and encouraged other victims to come forward. If my story helps even one person recognize the signs or find the courage to seek help, then some good has come from those difficult years, she often said when speaking to community groups. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Our first guests had arrived, heralding the beginning of our carefully planned Christmas celebration. Unlike the ostentatious appearance-focused gatherings of my mother and Richard, our event emphasized comfort, inclusion, and genuine connection. Throughout the evening, I watched Grandma holding court in the living room, surrounded by friends, both old and new. There was Aunt Sarah, who had become a steadfast ally during the worst days. Thomas and his wife cousins, who'd immediately offered support upon witnessing the Christmas Eve confrontation. New friends from the senior center and neighbors who had embraced Grandma with open arms. Even Vanessa was there, more subdued than in the past, but genuinely engaged. As we gathered around the dinner table, Grandma asked to speak before the meal. A year ago, I sat freezing on a porch, believing I had been forgotten by the world. She began, her voice strong and clear. Tonight, I am surrounded by true family people who value me not for what I can provide, but simply for who I am. She raised her glass in a toast to speaking up when we see injustice, to reaching out when we sense someone is suffering to recognizing that family is defined by love and respect, not merely by blood, and to second chances at joy at any age. The clinking of glasses punctuated her words, followed by animated conversation and laughter as the meal progressed. Watching her radiant in the glow of candlelight and genuine affection, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for this second chance we had been given. Later, as our guests departed and we settled by the fireplace with cups of cocoa, Grandma reached for my hand. "You saved my life," she said simply. "Not just physically on that cold night, but in all the ways that make life worth living." I shook my head. "You saved yourself too. Your resilience, your willingness to rebuild rather than bitter. You inspire me every day." That night reinforced the lessons we had both learned through our ordeal. That love without respect is not truly love. That family is defined by actions, not titles or biology. That speaking truth to power requires courage but brings ultimate freedom. That it is never too late to start again to reclaim joy and purpose. Most importantly, we learned that the true measure of a person is not found in the big dramatic moments of life, but in the small daily choices to treat others with dignity, to stand firm against injustice, and to create spaces where all can thrive. As we enter a new year together, I carry these lessons with me. I share them now in hopes that others might recognize the warning signs of elder abuse before situations become as desperate as ours did. Watch for unexplained changes in an elderly person's appearance or behavior. Be suspicious of sudden isolation or restricted communication. Question when family members always speak for an older relative, rather than allowing them to speak for themselves. If you suspect someone is suffering, reach out. Your attention might make all the difference, as it did for my grandmother on that Christmas Eve when I finally followed my instincts and came home unannounced. Have you ever had to stand up against your own family to protect someone vulnerable? Or have you witnessed signs of elder abuse that you wish you had acted on? Share your experiences in the comments below. Remember that by speaking out, we create a community of awareness that can protect our most vulnerable members. Please like and subscribe if this story touched your heart, and share it with someone who might need to hear these warnings. Together, we can ensure that fewer elders spend holidays alone and afraid, and more spend them surrounded by genuine love and respect. Thank you for listening to my story, and may your holidays be filled with the warmth of true family, however you define it.